Akua Ofori is a socialist and an anti-racism activist based in the Bay Area. She has been organizing for years against police brutality. She's been promoting women's rights and fighting LGBTQ oppression. And she was one of the lead organizers for the National March for Racial Justice in Washington, D.C. last September. She's joining us now to discuss Dr. King's legacy and how he has influenced modern activism. Akua, as an activist, yes, you do a lot of work trying to get people to confront their racism and the harm it causes. How much is your approach informed and influenced by Dr. King's work and his life?
Yes, thanks for having me. I think there's a lot to learn from Dr. King's legacy. I think one of the key things is his approach to organizing, which always included masses of people, right? And I think there is a contention in the current day about how do we end racism today, and whether it's something we can do through different avenues, whether it is NGOs or working with politicians, or working taking mass action and direct action, civil disobedience, etc. And I think that particular tactic, that of mass civil disobedience, remains one of the most important contributions of Dr. King's legacy and what he did. And I think through mass struggle with masses of people in the South, and eventually it went up north, he was able, along with thousands of other activists, able to win equal rights under the law for Black people who were living under Jim Crow segregation for decades.
So, Akua, when Dr. King was fighting for racial justice in the 1950s and 60s, he was painted as a terrorist in the media, very much in the same way current activist groups are being demonized by the mainstream media. He's now been vindicated and he's an icon. How does that belief that people can change keep you going?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important to acknowledge how Dr. King's imagery has been sanitized. Like he said, back in the 60s, he was considered a terrorist and too radical. In fact, as his message became more radical, addressing issues of economic injustice, some liberal institutions and politicians abandoned him. I think it also shaped what eventually became his assassination. He was in Memphis, basically campaigning around the demands of poor Black sanitation workers who had lost 2 workers to basically death by being crushed by one of the machinery. Dr. King came and supported the struggle in Memphis, demanding better wages and better working conditions, things that we still fight for today. Today we see workers struggling in West Virginia, Kentucky, Oklahoma, teachers basically demanding better wages and working conditions. And so the conditions are still there. And the question is, how do we bring back this legacy of mass struggle, of civil disobedience, of working people basically fighting for their rights, kind of putting up a vision of self-determination.
Akua, I have one more question for you, because you were just talking about, the circumstances under which Dr. King died. Dr. King died a very violent death, and we're seeing racial rights activists being killed all over the United States in mysterious circumstances. As an anti-racism activist yourself, do you fear for your own life? Why do you still persist with this sort of work, despite the possible risk it may have to your person?
Right. Well, I think violence is a strategy of the ruling class, those in power, to basically repress protest. And if we stop organizing and respond to that, we will never actually win the demands that we want. What we need to do is actually grow our numbers. The more of us there are, the harder it is to crush our struggles. And so I think with that, we need to, that's the vision and perspective I take as an activist. I can't do this alone. I have to organize with many more people so that even if someone like myself or others are taken out through violence, the movement continues. So building base, bringing in more people, building more leadership, and continuing the struggle from the grassroots is really the way to counter these acts of violence.
Thank you so much, Akua. I really appreciate talking to you. And we
you.
are going to continue following your work. Thank you so much.